Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to providing news of the Church. Today is Wednesday, February 9, 2022. The Pope includes apostates and blasphemers in the communion of saints, although he does not clarify whether they were previously repentant. The President of the European Bishops has asked Cardinal Walkie to resign and called for changes regarding the doctrine on homosexuality. Cardinal Marx of Munich has called for the admission of homosexual men to the priesthood, without specifying whether they are practicing or not. One of the forums of the German Synod has called for the admission of women to the priesthood. This request must now be discussed by the plenary assembly of the Synod. Cardinal Müller is ashamed of being German because of the harassment of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI by German bishops and lay Catholics. During the Wednesday's audience address, the Pope has included apostates and blasphemers in the communion of saints.
In his usual Wednesday catechesis, the Pope affirmed that sinners are also part of the communion of saints. In his address, the Pope affirms, "Many times we say in the Creed, I believe in the communion of saints." The Catechism affirms the communion of saints is precisely the Church. What does this mean? That the Church is reserved to the perfect? No. It means that it is the community of saved sinners. No one can be excluded from the Church. We are all saved sinners. In fact, the Pope added, the communion of saints doesn't concern only the brothers and sisters who are with me at this historic moment, but also those who have concluded their earthly pilgrimage and have crossed the threshold of death. They too are in communion with us. Let us think of those who have denied the faith, who are apostates, who are the persecutors of the Church, who have denied their baptism. Are these too at home? Yes. Also these, also the blasphemers, all of them. We are brothers. This is the communion of saints. The communion of saints holds together the community of believers on earth and in heaven.
Cardinal Holrich, President of the European Bishops, has asked Cardinal Walkie to resign and demanded that homosexual acts should not be considered sins.
After having declared himself last week in favor of female diaconate and the marriage of priests, the President of the European Bishops, Cardinal Holrich, has called for Cardinal Walkie's resignation and the acceptance of homosexual acts. Cardinal Walkie, Archbishop of Cologne, is not accused of any crime of protecting homosexual priests, while other German bishops, including Cardinal Marx, are accused of such crimes. However, Cardinal Holrich has asked Walkie to resign and not the others. It seems that he is no longer welcome in his diocese by a large majority. The Archbishop told the Berlin Catholic News Agency in an interview released on Tuesday, "If this were to happen to me, I would submit my resignation." Along with this, Cardinal Holrich has called for the Church to change its teaching on homosexuality, as he believes the Church is wrong to consider homosexual relations to be a sin. "I believe that the sociological scientific foundation of this teaching is no longer correct," he said. The Cardinal asserted that it was time for a fundamental review of Church teaching and suggested that the way Pope Francis has referred to homosexuality in the past could lead to a change in doctrine. Holrich made his comments in response to the public campaign by 125 Catholic Church employees in Germany who recently came out as homosexual and said they want to live openly without fear in the Church.
German Cardinal Marx, Archbishop of Munich, has expressed his support for the ordination of homosexual men to the priesthood.
Cardinal Reinhard Marx made the comments at a press conference where he was responding to a new report alleging that he and several of his predecessors, including then Archbishop Joseph Ratzinger, mishandled multiple cases of sexual abuse as Archbishops of Munich and Freising. After reading a prepared statement regretting the abuse, Marx went on to say that synodality was the basic requirement for a new church, and that homosexuality should not be a restriction on the ability to become a priest. How do we deal with the homosexuality of priests? He asked. Not everyone is obliged to declare his own sexual inclination, whether heterosexual or homosexual. He must decide that for himself. But if he declares it, it should be respected and should not be a restriction on becoming a priest. The comments follow more than 120 German priests, church employees, and other lay people coming out as LGBT in a televised documentary earlier this week, with the recently launched Out in Church pressure group seeking to overturn perennial Catholic teaching on the immorality of homosexual acts. One bishop, Helmut Deiser of Aachen, appeared in the documentary and stated that the Catholic Church needs to change its biblical position and laws regarding the issue of homosexuality.
The German Synod Forum, debating the structure of the Church, has approved by the vast majority that women can become priests. The vote of the plenary of the Synod has not yet been taken.
In a vote described as historic, the German Synod Forum debating the structure of the Church has pronounced itself in favor of the admission of women to the ordained ministry by a large majority. If approved by the Synodal Assembly, it would open wide the doors to schism within the Church. The approved document states, "It is not the participation of women in all the services and offices of the Church that requires justification, but the exclusion of women from sacramental offices." It assures that there is no clear line of tradition for the exclusion of women. Furthermore, it calls for a fundamental questioning and change of the prevailing power structures and relationships. In reality, the Church cannot in any way admit the ordination of women. John Paul II took it upon himself to settle the matter, as Cardinal Luis Ladaria, prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, recently recalled. St. John Paul II dedicated an apostolic letter to explain why the Church cannot ordain women as priests, bringing into play papal authority to settle the question definitely. The letter ends as follows. In order to remove all doubt on a question of great importance, which concerns the very divine constitution of the Church, in virtue of my ministry of confirming the brethren in the faith, I declare that the Church has in no way the faculty of conferring priestly ordination on women, and that this opinion must be considered definitive by all the faithful of the Church. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith responded to a dubia on the nature of the pontifical pronouncement, warning that it is a doctrine infallibly proposed by the Church. This doctrine demands definitive assent, since based on the written Word of God and constantly preserved and applied by the tradition of the Church from the beginning, it has been infallibly proposed by the ordinary and universal magisterium.
Cardinal Müller has expressed his sorrow for the persecution suffered by Benedict XVI and say he is ashamed of being German.
It is frankly grotesque to want to present before the world a man like Benedict XVI as a liar because of a meeting 42 years ago, which would be one of the hundreds of meetings he may or may not remember taking part in. This is what Cardinal Müller says about the Munich Diocese abuse report. Müller believes that Benedict XVI does not really need to be defended because to accuse him of such a morally low attitude not only shows a total lack of respect for a person and a Christian who has been most meritorious for the church and society, but it reveals the true intentions which have been fulfilled in moderately senseless defamation campaign against him. Every day, he added, I meet many people from different nations who ask me how is it possible that in Germany a pope from their homeland is called a liar. In view of these events, one can only be ashamed to be German, especially also because so many people who are themselves of goodwill fall for anti-Catholic propaganda. The new danger, says Mueller, is that innocent people are hastily suspected or even thrown into the media. Have all the people outraged and agitated in the case of Cardinal Pell, who was ultimately acquitted of all charges of sexual abuse, asked for forgiveness or at least apologized to God in their conscience? In this frivolous line follow today the hypocritical church reformers who want to prevent sexual crimes against adolescents by legitimizing heterosexual and homosexual contacts of priests or lay employees with adults. In doing so, they undermine revealed morality and natural ethics. They turn celibacy into a blasphemous farce.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the double standards applied to those accused of negligence in the matter of abuse.
This is a manhunt. Those were Cardinal Pell's words when he was accused of having committed sexual abuse against minors, an accusation that led him to jail after being convicted in first and second instance. And unfounded accusation, an accusation of something of which he was manifestly innocent. It was the Supreme Court of Australia which was responsible for undoing the accusation and giving him back his freedom. But by then he had already spent 404 days in prison, in solitary confinement, and most of that time without even being able to celebrate the Holy Mass. But Pell was guilty, in quotation marks, of two crimes for some people. Pell is conservative and had tried on behalf of the Pope to clean up the Vatican finances. Those were the reasons for which the hunt against him was organized. It was yet to be discovered who paid for the accusations, how much money was sent, and to whom it was sent. I have been thinking these days about this phrase of Cardinal Pell about what happened to him when I have seen what is being organized against another cardinal, in this case the Cardinal of Cologne in Germany, Cardinal Wolke. Cardinal Wolke was accused of permissiveness with pedophile priests, an accusation that came from a report prepared by a team of lawyers in the Diocese of Munich. A team of lawyers that made a report so crude and crass that it was manifestly biased. What Wolke did was to commission another report, and above all, he put the results in the hands of the police. In that report, he was totally exonerated. Instead, the one who was implicated was the one who had been Vicar General of the Diocese of Cologne at the time of the event, and current Bishop of Hamburg, Bishop Hess. But if Wolke was innocent of the accusations of covering up for pedophile priests, Wolke is guilty of the same crimes, in quotation marks, that Cardinal Pell had committed. Because he is conservative, a great crime. And Wolke is also one of the few bishops who are confronting the rest of the episcopate in this schismatic synod that the German Church is carrying out and which has the Holy Father so worried. It's necessary to put an end to him, and that is why they have organized this hunt. Surprisingly for some, and logically for others, Wilkie, who comes out clean in the report delivered to the police, and whose only reproach that can be made to him is that he has not known how to manage the communication of what happened, Wilkie is punished to be a few months of retirement outside the diocese, while Hess, who in fact is implicated and who also presents his resignation is not accepted and no punishment is imposed on him. Well, that time of retirement that Wilkie was given is about to be over, and that is why the harassment against him to resign has been intensely reactivated. His enemies within the German Bishops' Conference and his enemies outside are raising their voices demanding his resignation. Among these voices that asks him to resign, there is someone as prestigious, as important as Cardinal Hollerich. Cardinal Hollerich is the Archbishop of Luxembourg. He is a Jesuit, but he is also the president of the European Episcopal Conferences, and he is the rapporteur of the next synod, the Synod of Synodality. So Hollerich has said that Wilkie should resign because his people don't want him. His diocese doesn't want him. This has been the argument. You have to leave because your people don't want you. I don't believe that Hollerich has gone person by person, house by house, to ask the Catholics of Cologne. Possibly he was based to make such harsh statement on a study that every year the Church in Germany publishes on the situation of the Church, that is to say, on those who leave, the apostates. In this study, which has just been published, it is said that the Diocese of Cologne is the one that has increased more in percentage of apostates. And that is possibly the argument that Hollerich has to say that Wilkie has to go. I don't know how it has not occurred to His Eminence to think that this could be something that could be organized. How easy it is to organize a massive apostasy among the liberals, which of course exist in the Diocese of Cologne, to achieve that result. It is enough to agree, and it is very easy to do so, to leave and get the percentage to increase. It seems to me a very probable thing. Surprisingly for some people, and logically for others, Hollerich has not said a word about the need for the resignation of Batzing, who is the president of the German Bishops' Conference, or of Cardinal Marx, Cardinal Archbishop of Munich, who are indeed directly implicated in cases of protection or cover-up of pedophile priests. They are not asked to resign, and note that the Diocese of Munich is the one that has had more apostasy casualties in absolute numbers, not in percentage, which has been Cologne, but in absolute numbers where more apostates have occurred has been in Munich, but Marx is not asked to resign, surprisingly for some, logically for others. But perhaps this can be understood a little more if one takes into account the statements that Cardinal Hollerich has made this week in favor of the married priesthood, the female deaconate, which everyone knows is the principle of the female priesthood, and the acceptance of homosexual acts as morally good acts. Three of the main points defended by the German Synod. Well, all this, I repeat, seems to me nothing more than a hunt against a man who bothers them, who is also the Archbishop of one of the main dioceses of Germany, Cardinal Walkie. A hunt that doesn't have him as a major piece. The major piece is Benedict XVI. We have already talked about that. I will talk again when Benedict XVI makes public his allegations against his accusers. Accusers that, curiously, are in the same team of lawyers who pointed out Cardinal Walkie as guilty. Accusers, the team of lawyers who are paid by the Diocese of Munich. Can anyone be surprised that this is the result? Let us pray. See you next week, God willing.
If you would like to keep up to date with what is happening in the Church, you can visit our news page, www.magnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.